stunning admission from President Biden. He now says if Donald Trump was not running for president in 2024, he's not sure that he would also be in the race. Those comments today at a fundraiser in Boston. Let's bring in CNN political director David Chalian. David, an incredibly candid admission by President Biden. What do you make of it?
Well, we had seen a lot of previous reporting, including our own here at CNN, that there's no doubt that Trump was a motivating factor, of course, Jake, in Biden's thinking about running for re-election. But as Biden is wont to do in these scenarios where he's behind closed doors, he kind of reveals his innermost thoughts. And what we're seeing here is a real, clearly defined rationale for Biden pursuing re-election despite his current political standing, which is not that great in the polls, obviously, the conversation about his age and concern among Democrats if he is the best candidate to put forward. What Joe Biden is making clear with these comments, he clearly thinks, because he said also Democrats cannot let Trump win, as a part of his comments say, he clearly thinks he is the single best Democrat to be able to defeat Donald Trump because he did so once. We'll see if it plays out this way. I would also say, Jake, it raises the question, I know he's the big front runner. What if Donald Trump is not the Republican nominee? Does that mean President Biden is going to reconsider his re-election effort if that is the key rationale for his running?
Is this the kind of admission a candidate should be making?
Well, it clearly is going to provide Donald Trump an opportunity here to talk about Joe Biden being more focused on him than anything else. But I do think if Joe Biden's critical mission at this time is starting to piece back his coalition of voters, some of which he's seen a diminishment of support, reminding those voters of the contrast with Donald Trump and that Donald Trump is the target here could help rally the troops, if you will.
Interesting. David, stick around. I also want to bring in CNN's Kristen Holmes and Michael LaRosa, former special assistant to President Biden. Michael, you worked for President Biden. Have you heard him say this before behind closed doors? And are you surprised he admitted this to people outside the White House?
Well, we always heard him say, or everybody, the way everybody always spoke about a second term was never in doubt. It was always, nobody runs for president for 4 years. And you know what? I kind of believe that. The guy has been trying to run for president his entire life. I don't believe that he'd be willingly giving up the presidency on his own if it were not Donald Trump. However, I would like to see him start being more candid in public. I think these news-making events through pool reports are getting a little weak. He needs to start being candid with everybody. And first of all, as David mentioned, a longtime Clinton person once told me, fail to plan, plan to fail. What if it isn't Donald Trump? What if the contrast is him and Nikki Haley? I don't know if anybody, any Democrat, including the White House, wants that contrast. In my lifetime, we haven't seen a primary turn out exactly the way it started. John Kerry had to remortgage his house in order to, because everybody thought he was dead. Nobody thought Bernie Sanders would be taking Hillary Clinton to the convention. And, I remember in 2007 when Charlie Cook said Hillary was a freight train and Obama should get out of her way. None of these primaries end up the way they start. And I would just caution,
Yeah. When you say, what if it is Nikki Haley? I mean, all polls indicate that Nikki Haley would demolish Joe Biden in a one-on-one, although who knows? That's just a poll. It's not an actual election result. How do you think Donald Trump, as somebody who covers him, how do you think Donald Trump will react to his saying this?
I mean, I believe that the Trump campaign is likely to piece this together and serve it as red meat to the base. We will like to hear from Donald Trump tonight on this. He's going to be doing a town hall with Fox News instead of going to the debate tomorrow night. But this really is part of his argument overall, is that Biden is personally out to get him, that Democrats and Biden are out to get him. That's why they are, quote unquote, targeting him with these indictments. And that is going to be part of this. They're saying, essentially, and what I just heard from one Republican operative, this is an opportunity for Trump's campaign to say, look, they really are actually after him. He doesn't even want to run to be president of this country. It's all specific to Donald Trump.
These comments, as you know, make it clear that Biden believes he is the only Democrat that can beat Donald Trump. Because if he thought that Kamala Harris or Buttigieg or Whitmer or Newsom or Klobuchar, if any of them, could do it, just maybe doesn't have as good a chance, but could do it, then theoretically, at least according to what he said, he might bow out.
And Jake, this is very similar to what his thinking was 4 years ago. This is why he got in the race after Charlottesville. You recall that was his calling, and he looked at the field of Democrats that were running or planning to run at the time, and he thought he was the only one that could actually see this through and prevent a Trump second term. That feeling clearly has not dissipated in his thinking over these last 4 years.
Michael, what's your take? Do you think that no other Democrat could beat Donald Trump, or at the very least, do you think that Joe Biden is the strongest Democrat to take on Donald Trump?
Well, I understand his logic. He beat the guy by 8 million votes. In the grand scheme of things, in the macro sense, it wasn't really that close of a race. It was the 7th closest in American history. So I understand why he says that, and a lot of people do believe that it will take Biden to beat Trump again. But there is a big bench of talent on the Democratic side. We just don't know that because there really isn't a choice. And to be honest, there usually isn't with an incumbent, right? This is pretty standard operating procedure. He earned the right to run for re-election. He's been one of the better performing first-term presidents we've ever had.
And Kristen, these comments come as Trump is trying to flip the switch and make it as though Joe Biden is actually the biggest threat to democracy, even though Donald Trump is the first president in history that refused to leave office peacefully, the first one to not allow a peaceful transfer of power, the first one that staged an insurrection or incited an insurrection, the first
and
one.
Continues to question our democratic processes, like the election. I mean, that is the biggest key of democracy. And
what's the strategy there?
This is Donald Trump's strategy always, and this is trying to really communicate with Republicans. He likes to flip the script, and part of this is, again, it's the same argument that he's been saying for months, which is that Joe Biden is against democracy because he is, quote unquote, coming after him, that these 4 indictments are Joe Biden using the Justice Department against Donald Trump, his political opponent. The irony in this is the fact that Trump himself has said that if he is reelected, he would use the Justice Department to go after his political enemies, including Joe Biden. This is just his argument, but I do want to be very clear. When I talk to his supporters at these rallies, they believe it. When he made this speech, they were cheering. This is something that he is communicating to them, and they are eating it up. And I just think that needs to be made clear that despite the evidence, that is true.
Yeah, I mean, they believe his lies. We've seen that in 2020 with the election lies.
And Jake,
thank you so much, one and all. I want to bring in Senator Mark Warner. He's a Democrat from Virginia, chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator, I have a lot of topics to ask you about. I have to start with your reaction to President Biden telling donors today that he isn't sure he would be running for re-election if Donald Trump wasn't also running. What do you think of that?
You know, Jake, I don't know what to think. I know he got into the race because of Donald Trump. I think he believes he can run a strong race against Donald Trump. You know, I don't even have to go through the litany that you just went through of all the threats that Donald Trump poses to democracy. You know, we're at a critical time right now. I think that I wish would get more attention. You know, are we actually going to stand by Ukraine in its willingness to defend against another autocratic figure?
It's my next
Vladimir
question.
Putin. But the back and forth of the, you know, that's your guys' job to parse all those comments.